Okay.
And the question should be in Q&A, right? Not in chat. Yeah, cool.
Correct.
Yep. So we still have some time left. So let's wait. Already people coming in.
Yeah, very good. We are a bit early, but everything works. And in 8 minutes, we're going to start.
I think my screen is still. Okay, let's. Hello, good morning. Welcome everybody joining the webinar. We will start in a few minutes, 11:02. Everybody is joining at the moment. We see the attendees coming in. So just a few minutes and we'll start this session. Hello, good morning everybody. It's 11 o'clock. Everybody's coming into the meeting. We'll just give it a couple of minutes, 2 minutes from now, and we'll start the webinar. Good morning, everyone. It's 11:01. We'll start the webinar in 1 minute. Just let everybody join. Good morning. We'll be starting the webinar now. So I'm Olaf de Ruiter, security engineer at Tenable. And today we'll talk with you about Tenable One, exposure management platform for the modern attack surface. I'm joined with Jerry, who will introduce himself now.
Yes, thank you very much, Olaf. Jerry Zwanenburg, security engineer based in the Netherlands for the last 3.5 years. And today we're going to provide you a practical webinar.
So let us first talk about today. Yeah, so there will be an additional webinar in 2 weeks' time. So this first webinar is to talk about Tenable One and go over asset management and risk-based vulnerability management, external attack surface management, and web application scanning. So we're focusing on those topics. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll have a follow-on webinar to go more into, again, we'll touch asset management once more, and then look at exposure cards and attack path analysis. Yeah. So yeah, where are we coming from? So yeah, Tenable started about 25 years ago with Nessus, the vulnerability scanner that is well known by a lot of security professionals in the market to do security assessments. Yeah. And at that time, it was about indeed software vulnerabilities, configuration vulnerabilities in endpoint servers, workstations, network devices, all kinds of things living in the local data center, or at least in the environment of a customer environment. Yeah. So, and it was all intended to prevent a successful attack. Yeah. So a lot has changed in the last 25 years with the upcoming of cloud and the different ways of consuming IT. So the attack surface has greatly expanded, and the issue at the moment is getting full visibility on the entire attack surface. Yeah. There are silos. So, and having the ability to combine the data from those silos to give one complete view is lacking. And then the middle thing that is maybe for most customers a big issue is resource limitations. Having the people available in the security teams, in the IT operations teams, to look at the data and act on it. So the customers need help with this. And to the right, communicating it, making the reports to management levels, to actually communicate where is the risk and how should you indeed address it. So that's something Tenable focuses on. So if you look at the entire attack surface, attackers will always go for the weakest link. So if that's on-prem IT, your web servers facing the internet or facing overall any device which is facing the internet, web applications, public cloud, these are indeed the silos where we're looking at. And to the right, industrial OT, because of the convergence of IT and OT, what's happening at the moment, and as well identity to the right. So you have to look at vulnerabilities in software, but as well configuration, as well as identity. So there are several areas that need to be looked at any time, in moment in time for vulnerabilities. So an example. So for software vulnerabilities, a well-known example is the WannaCry example, which was because of a vulnerability from a Microsoft vulnerability. Microsoft introduced a patch, but because it was not well implemented quickly enough after it was released, it could be exploited. So if there was the right hygiene from the start, the patch would have been applied quick enough, so WannaCry would not have been able to attack customers. So it's very important to have your vulnerability management program well operating. So if you look at the external attack surface, so internet facing assets, Equifax is an example. It was a vulnerability of Apache Struts, which caused that attack. The Panama paper leaks, which was because of a web application vulnerability in WordPress and Drupal, which caused the leak of that information onto the internet. So there are more examples here. I will go into those because today we're focusing primarily on the software vulnerabilities, the external attack surface, and indeed the web applications. So Tenable's goals have remained the same for the last 25 years to prevent the successful attack. So we've evolved from vulnerability assessment with Nessus to vulnerability management with Tenable IO and Tenable Security Center. The different solutions. Eventually to risk-based vulnerability management, and now to the exposure platform. Where we bring everything together. So what Tenable also does behind that is a large part of our work goes into research. So, and what's shown to the right is some of the statistics that shows that we spend a lot of time on research, because vulnerability management, exposure management is our core capability. That's the focus of. We do not do anything else than this. So more than 400 0 days disclosed for the last years. Since 1998, releasing plugins for many known systems and vulnerabilities and doing those assessments. So we're covering about over 74K of vulnerabilities with that. And to the bottom, within 24 hours, we release indeed on average the a new plugin to detect a vulnerability. And an example there is the Log4j. So Tenable was very quickly had a plugin available for the Log4j vulnerability, so that customers would receive that automatically in their backend. So for Security Center, Nessus, and Tenable IO, the different platforms that you can use for vulnerability management, to quickly discover where are you vulnerable. And Jerry will show in the demo how that works, how simple it is to find the assets that have a particular software installed and could be exposed to a vulnerability. So Tenable One exposure platform, just look at it from high level. So at the bottom, we've got different sensors. So vulnerability management, bringing that data into a data lake in the middle. Web application security, cloud security, identity security, and the external attack surface mentioned. That all feeds into a data lake. So that's new with Tenable One. The data is aggregated. We calculate the risk on that data and recommendations and provide benchmarking. Yeah. And on the top, you see lenses, which you can use to look into that data. And these are the initial lenses. More will come in the future. To the right, it starts off with asset inventory. So you see all your assets, compute assets, but also your web applications, your Active Directory assets, and everything is correlated there, brings together and is visible. Yeah. To the left, we've got exposure view. So that will give you overall view of the whole organization, your cyber exposure, your posture. So where are you with your cyber exposure program? Yeah, how is it trending? What is it? Are you doing things better, or are things deteriorating or getting worse? That is all viewable in the cyber exposure. So it's more for C-level management. Can look into that, and you can indeed use the tagging, which we'll show you in the demo as well, to group applications that are important to you and to have that view of those applications there. Yeah. And in the middle, attack path analysis. In the next webinar, we'll go into that one. We'll use the information, so correlate vulnerabilities in applications and configuration and in identity to show the potential attack paths that are in the environment that an attacker could take. So to disrupt those attack paths up front. Yeah. So it's a threat hunting tool. Yeah. So it visualizes the attack paths, which is very interesting. Yeah. So we'll go into that later. Yeah. So today we'll focus on asset inventory. That's what we'll show in the demo. Vulnerability management, external attack service management. Yeah. And web application security. So going into these modules. So first, vulnerability management. This is, of course, our legacy, of course. Support a lot of, we have a lot of plugins for this. We're quick to market to bring new plugins out to show you what matters to you, yeah, in your environment. What are the critical vulnerabilities? Yeah. So we use different sources of data to calculate those risks, and Jerry will go into that more deeply. Yeah. So vulnerability priority rating. That's a typical term used by Tenable, which our research team uses to calculate the risk every day. Actual risk of a vulnerability. Yeah. So it's not a static calculation like the common vulnerability scoring system, yeah, which is the well-known system used in the market. Yeah. Then we'll talk about external attack service management. Yeah. So this is discovering your unknowns from the outside. Yeah. So how are you seen on the internet based on your domain name, for example, but as well your ASN number, so very specific number that's well, companies do have those registered on the internet. So we use several sources of information which we've collected over the last 5 years, and you can look into that information and see your organization from the outside. So you see indeed in the screenshot, and Jerry will show in the demo more in detail, what ports are exposed. Do I expect those assets to be visible on the internet? Yeah. So you can see that every day or every 2 weeks or in a period of 3 months. So we have different ways of showing that data to you. Yeah. So to fully show you your external attack service. Yeah. And be aware of what's changing. And then finally, we'll go into web application scanning. Often you have a web application indeed published to the internet, and then you want to know, okay, what are my configuration vulnerabilities on that website. Yeah. So next to the software vulnerabilities, you want to know exactly what would be vulnerable on that web application or in that website. Yeah. It's very simple to configure, very easy to set up. So you don't need to be very technical to do this. And then you can get already the value out of it. So as shown here in the OWASP top 10, which is a very well-known framework of testing the vulnerabilities of a website and a web application. Yeah. So finally, it starts off with the attack service, which is made of many components, which are shown here to the left. It's growing for a lot of customers. It's dynamic, so every day it's changing. It's interconnected. You're using on-prem, you're using public cloud, different sources are used. So you need to gather everything of that attack service using the different sensors. Yeah. So a Nessus scanner but as well a cloud connector you could use to gather the data, a web application scanner, all these things that are here. So to gather that information, that's comes into the Tenable solutions. Yeah. So here are the different solutions for the internal attack servers, for cloud security, to see your cloud security posture management. Yeah. Are you adhering to the standards that that Microsoft or whatever cloud provider you use are recommending, as well as the industry standards. So the auditing of your environment, also something very important to do, and that can be done with the Tenable solutions. So to show your exposure, and that comes to in the total platform itself. Yeah. So you see here it's a data lake. So there all the data comes together, and we score the assets. So the asset criticality rating. So we score if an asset is, we detect if it's face to the internet, if it's internal, if it's a test machine. So we can already, using the data we collect, see if an asset is important to you. You yourself can change that asset criticality even dynamically. And that will help you to prioritize the elements or the assets that are important to you. Yeah. So what are your golden eggs? What is your most critical data and your most critical applications? Yeah. And then you have the vulnerability priority rating. Yeah, that's dynamic scoring. It happens every day. And that brings up a total asset exposure score and an overall organization cyber exposure score. Yeah. So this is all powered by Tenable indeed research, and helps our customers to get that unified view of their modern attack servers. Yeah. So I now want to turn over to Jerry to really give you a view of Tenable One and show you indeed the environment. Yeah. So let me stop the sharing. Jerry, can you?
Yes, thank you very much, Olaf. Let me share my screen. Think you can see my screen, right, Olaf?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So let me first log into Tenable One. At least we want to explain you what is that all about, right? So once you log into Tenable One as the cyber exposure platform, you can see the workspace basically where we're going to land in. So Tenable IO as the core vulnerability management platform. This is the workspace where we log into, right? And it consists, on top of it, it consists of these solutions I have enabled in my environment, right? So the ASM, we love acronyms, the external attack surface management, which I'm going to show you. We have the Tenable container security or cloud security, I must say, Tenable IO as the core vulnerability management, and the Tenable web application scanning. And so for the demo, I'm going to start with the asset inventory, because the analysis and prioritization guidance are your lenses to extract that data and make it more meaningful for your organization on the different levels you have. And so let's dive into that first. And so in the asset inventory, you can imagine if when you're running your vulnerability management program, or I must say your cyber exposure program within your company, this will consist of internally scanners and cloud scanners, maybe some laptops which are all over the place, maybe some agents. Cloud workloads can consist some agents. We have external attack surface management, type of sensors. We have types of sensor for the web applications. You can here see the different categories, and that brings all that data into the data lake, right? So here you can see the overall view of the number of assets, the new assets you've seen in the last 7 days, the updated assets. Right? We constantly monitor the assets and the vulnerabilities, right? And each time we provide you contextual information for that asset, as for your environment, as what your security posture looks like as a whole, right? So let's take it step by step. So here you see the different assets types you have. Here you can see the asset exposure score, which consists of the asset criticality score and the vulnerability priority rating, which I will show you later on how that it's being constructed. So the asset criticality score and the vulnerability priority rating are calculating that risk for these assets you can see here below, right? So this already gives you an overview of your number of assets And based on the types of assets, you can here filter down in your web applications, for instance, or in your computer resources or your identities and so on, right? You can easily look for certain asset types. For instance, just type in the name and you can find it already, very easy to use. Or you can make filters to make your data more meaningful, right? So you can add filters, and what you will see immediately is that your filters are going to look for, in my case, for my tags. Now, tags is an element you use in your vulnerability management program to align more your technical controls to your business needs. Right now, what does that mean? That means that for the cloud teams, when you're assigning tags automatically to those cloud workloads, the cloud team will immediately see his view, which is relevant for him, right? So tagging is key as well for role-based access control, to see the information and to provide you the information you really want to see and which is relevant for you. We can export the data. The complete platform is API driven, so you can talk to the API with the APN to the backend of Tenable.io to extract some information, and here you can export it right to CSV or to PDF. Or if you would like to see the data more, and you want to filter on other elements. To give you an example, if there are a lot of criteria we can search on, but let's see if I want to see quickly what are my most critical vulnerabilities on which assets. You can see that immediately, right, by filtering the view as I'm doing now, right? So here you can see, okay, here I got my Windows 2012 box having the most critical vulnerabilities, right? So, and if I then dive into more deeper in this asset view, you can see the tags which are collected with it. And here you can see that 891 score, 1000. It is critical when it's last being modified. The asset ID when it's created, last observed, the fully qualified domain name, and what is the general purpose, the first observed MAC address, etc., etc. If I do show all, you can even see the installed software. So, right, it is a bunch we collect on the asset information, and it all starts with just a simple basic network scan, right? Credential based or uncredential based, or I can better say authenticated or non-authenticated scans. This will enrich that data even more, such as the installed software, right? And we can apply filters in it, right? So here you can see it's all being Microsoft VMware tools, and I got SQL Server here installed, and the CPE, the Common Platform Enumerator, I can use that later on to filter on specific views which are more meaningful for myself. Now, again, here you can see that asset criticality score. Before I forget, this is something you can adjust if you want. We can use any type of CMDB to leverage that, or any kind of ITSM solution such as ServiceNow. We can leverage that so to bring that value inside of the vulnerability management program, or the other way around, right? So once we do scanning, we already exploring the network, and we are able to provide an asset criticality baseline score, right? Which does that based on whether the asset is routable to the internet, based on the device type, if there is a database installed, yes or no. It's already baselining that asset criticality score, and that's how we build out the asset exposure score, as you could see right here, right? That means we adding that risk into the vulnerability management program. So lots of details in the asset inventory. And here, one more time, you can see the different tags I've created in my environment. Can be simple on an operating system, can be part of a subsidiary, for instance, to make it more meaningful for your business, right? So based on your baselining, you do, cyber exposure management is going to be more meaningful and going to provide you added value. Now, finally, you can see that the sources where they're coming from the different types of sensor. Olaf already mentioned that briefly, but at least this is where it starts about with asset management, vulnerability management. We are following the assets, we are following the vulnerabilities, right? So now if I jump back to my workspace management. This is where it all starts, right? Based on the discovery scans and the different types of scans we have to make that data more meaningful. Now, if I go to Tenable.io to tell you some other use cases there as well, in order to drive your vulnerability management program, click the right credential, and then when you're logging into your Tenable.io environment, and you can immediately see here with the dashboard already what is relevant for you. And so not only you can see here the cyber exposure feed if you want to see that, but yeah, you can also double click on the links, and you can then see that vulnerability management overview on what kind of data do I have in my environment, right? So I see here the total number of vulnerabilities, right? Which is a lot, right? How do I filter down what is relevant for me, right? And which I need to mitigate first, right? Here we can see the severity. Now, Olaf touched upon that vulnerability priority rating, which adds risk into that vulnerability management, right? In that vulnerability itself, right? So here we can double click on this vulnerability, and it will show you the more context information about that vulnerability. And you can here see all kind of details, the plugin details we have once that is being created, the vulnerability priority rating. This is a dynamic score. So every 24 hours, we calculate that risk, and that the vulnerability priority rating consists of CVS plus a couple of dynamic elements, right? So we have like between the 150 and 180 data points we use from ourselves, but also externally with 100 plus software vendors, but also with vulnerability types of businesses such as ExploitDB or National Vulnerability Database to be able to calculate that risk every 24 hours. So at least that's where you adding risk more into CVSS as well, right? Again, CVSS is static, sorry. So you can see why. You can see we've got exploits, we get it available. We can see all the information when it's first seen, when it's last seen, what are the VPR drivers, the threat recency, the threat intensity, the exploit code maturity. And that is basically calculating that risk score every 24 hours, right? Now, why do we find this vulnerability? That's because we're detecting the packages installed, right? I can use another vulnerability as well. I can use the Windows example, at which again, you have that contextual information, including your remediation there as well. Here we go, we see the same plugin VPR scores and assets and details on the right hand, and we can see the output. And if I just double click here we can see that even in the integration with SCCM, why this is not being patched, why this is being patched, right? And how we leverage that integration there with SCCM as well.
Maybe to add quickly, so we're checking SCCM, but we're also checking the host if it has been rebooted, if indeed if it has been installed properly.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We're doing multiple checks. So it's the auditing of the patching process, very important with vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and two things are interesting you're saying, right? So we're checking that whether that server is rebooted. Sometimes you need to put in registry setting and so on. We can actually be monitoring all those steps, right? To be able to see whether your risk is being reduced or mitigated, yes or no. So going back to the vulnerabilities, we can do other things here as well, right? So if I just clear out my filters, here I can typical do things like I can filter on, for instance, on software which is out of support, right? So here you can already see what software is not being is supported, out of support. These are legacy systems. At least you are aware of it, and you can see how simple you can do it. And you can query more to it. You can even add a common platform enumerator, the example I showed you earlier in the asset management view, had to filter on Microsoft, so at least you only see the Microsoft one. So this way you can very easy search for what you want, right? And then you can save your searches, which I already did in my environment, right? So at least you can use that for your environment, and you can use it more often, right? So this is very very powerful. Just to show you as an example. Having said that, I saw one, the SSL expiry, and sometimes we forget. We can even look up for these types of data in your environment as well, next to your vulnerability management, right? So it all consists of software vulnerabilities and configuration vulnerabilities, right?
We have another question on the chat, which is good. How can we see if certain vulnerabilities is exploitable remotely and/or exploitable without authentication? Yeah. So I think you already show that, Jerry? The details of you get that information with the.
I go one step back indeed, and then I will just show you the example which I gave you earlier on. We know, the platform knows, based on the sources we use, not only Tenable only data, whether this vulnerability has exploits available. So this means that there are exploits available for this vulnerability, right? So in exploit DB, or you use Kali Linux, for instance, you can see where for this vulnerability, whether you can use and leverage those exploits which are available. Now, these are available because we tell you from the platform that these are available, right? And again, it's not only Tenable data, it's also data from the examples I named earlier, from exploit DB, from National Vulnerability Database, social media. We monitoring parts of dark web even as well, so we can follow what is being developed in terms of exploit code, and every 24 hours we calculate that. So in this case, you see the maturity code is actually quite high. You see a lot with low maturity code, even though it is risk. It increases the risk, and that's why the risk is much higher than sometimes CVSS provides us, right? So here you can see that CVSS score version 3 is telling us it's a 5.9. Probably, most likely, when this vulnerability came out, it didn't have exploits available. I hope that answered the question, Olaf.
Yes, I think it does. I've said that. Okay.
So going back, I just wanted to show you some other examples monitoring for vulnerabilities, what you can do with the platform, the asset data we collect, as Olaf explains, and where I started with collecting all the information. What you can do is in searching in your data sets to make it more meaningful for you, right? So you can do a lot of stuff in it. So I will go back to my workspace again. This concludes the practical overview of Tenable IO and the asset management, which I showed you in the beginning. Now I will dive into the external attack surface management. For that, I need to log into my own environment, which where I have more permissions on it. So at least you get the same experience as you were driving this for your environment, right? So, and yes, as all multi-factor authentication. So give me 1 minute. Here we go. And when we're logging in, I go to my external attack surface management, and the external attack surface management is BitDiscovery with Tenable acquired, I think 1 year ago. And we're bringing back that data to the Tenable One platform. And just for the sake of the demo, I will show you once you evaluate external attack surface management, for instance, or when you want to have an assessment, this is what you're going to see. So we're going to type in the domain name. In my case, I just add an example.com, because it's based, the information we collect, it's based on public internet information, right? Which is actually quite a lot. Now this is collecting, right? We need to keep this time, to give it some time. Normally 24 hours, 48 hours, it generates a lot. And for that, I will jump into the inventory I already created for the example.com, but at least you can see what kind of data it is being provided. Now here, we see the example.com on your left, we have added that. It's being collected. And in this case, you can already see IP addresses for that domain. We can see that ASN, ASN is autonomous system number, which is actually quite useful because a lot of companies using this registration. So you can actually see when there are new domains being registered by other parts of the company, marketing, for instance, you can suddenly see things you're not aware of, right? And that is external attack surface management, right? Monitoring the things which are unknown, right? Typically within Tenable.io and with web application scanning, you're using domain names, IP addresses, FQDNs. These are things you know, right? And you also want to know what you don't know. Now, here I've added the example.com, right? Now, before I dive into what data we have behind it, you can here see that this is a lamp. This gives provides us the lights and insights. It's called suggestions. So when I double click on the suggestion, here we have it is about 23 rules which we use to correlate your domain name, in my case, the example.com, to correlate that with things you might not be aware of. Now, typical things we use like a who is on DNS or email addresses from persons related to your organization registering your domains. Now we have like a 23 rules, and here you can then see the suggested domains which are related to example.com. So here comes very interesting for companies to see, wait a minute, I have domains which I'm not even aware of, right? Because I didn't put it in. Now from here, you can add those domain and do a more in-depth analysis based on that public information. But at least it shows you this, what we call the suggested domain, which are related to the domain name you're adding, right? So suddenly your external attack surface management becomes far more relevant because you also correlate it to things you're not aware of, right? So hold that thought, right? So if you're collecting that information, and I go back to my example.com, the overview I just provide you. Here we're going to see what other elements we can monitor, right? So if I go to my scroll bar, you can see this is the running environment, by the way. You can see it is populating, right? So if I go to my settings and I go to manage my columns, these are the data types, and if I'm correct, Olaf, there's about 200 attributes we can monitor, or we can put in to see if these are relevant for your environment. Sometimes
Correct.
you simply are not available. That's not because we cannot detect it, but because simply these are not available, right? So typical things in assessments we do as well. We can check for SSL expiration, right?
Yeah, a question about that on the chat. Yeah, that's indeed. So we check.
Oh.
Yeah, so you can show that one. Yeah. So
these are typical things. I just provide you slow, not too quick, but a couple of examples which commonly being used in firsthand. You can see you can select any types here as well, whether that is SaaS, PaaS, or IaaS, for instance, or more relevant. If I have vulnerabilities on my external attack surface management, what kind of applications do I have? That's the CPE again. Whether my domain name has some blacklisted IP addresses, even on certain application I can monitor.
Question on the chat about impersonating domain registrations. Yeah, you can do that. So it will monitor on typos indeed. Domain names that are looking the same. You can put in your brand names even, so if people are
but this is a good example of that 23 rules we have where we correlate in a particular domain name, which has a lot of phishing emails attackers are using by making the name just like as it is originally. And you can monitoring it. We can see it. We will detect it, right? And I'm just adding now more fields into and what we're going to see. And again, you can see it's it's a lot. To at least you have an overview on what we currently can do. When I move my bar and I do show here, at least then I can see, you can see how quickly it is already. And what kind of CVEs do I have here? So that makes it really interesting. And what as well, you can look for it. I can make certain filters, right? I can search for any type of ports, and maybe I have assets which are connected directly to the internet, which is not the best practice, obviously, right? So I can put in here any port, but if I do port number, I can here see I have my port numbers, right? And I can see I have a few examples of assets which maybe are known, which are unknown, could be for me, but I can save this. I can save it, and here I can say, okay, put in FTP 21 subscription. Now, why is this useful? Because we can monitoring it. This way, we don't need to do it manually as I'm now doing, right? I can look for RDP ports. I can use I can use other examples there as well, right? At least to make it more meaningful. Now I can imagine it is a lot what we have on the screen right now, but from here you can simply export it or the information, and you can have a more closer look on what kind of services do I have running on this machine, right? Same for the suggested domain. Remember what I said. If there are domains where you're not aware of, you can add that domain into it, and you can see whether you have assets with ports or anything open which you don't like, right? So and that's basically external attack surface management, which is part of the Tenable One platform, right? So you have everything in it. So here you can see the whole list. You even see the CVEs on it. Very easy to use and quickly to get and to grab the information. I know I'm scrolling very quickly, but just here you can see whether that is blacklisted, yes or no. And in my case, it's not. Even the location, country, etc., etc. You might have assets in countries you're not aware of. Well, in my case, I can see it is in Russia, right? So okay, this could be new, right? So right, coming back to at least external attack surface management. And the example, I'm just providing you with some information. All the data assets I have shown you here, at least it's more meaningful, at least so you can at least see what you can do. Now here you see that lamp is blinking, because this is the domain I just added, right? The other, it's the same domain name. It's because I already have added that, right? So you can see how quickly these being populated, right? Now, in regards to the subscriptions, here you can see this one is the one we added, right? So I'm based on that, I can make alerts. I can integrate it right into anything like ServiceNow, Jira, for instance. I can make a link to it so people can see it. Basically, that is my message, right? So this way you can integrate it. So it's being monitored for you. Now, external attack service management comes in two flavors. We're monitoring it every 14 days, once every 2 weeks, or we do it every 24 hours, right? So that's how we're monitoring those. And then this can be very useful. Now, if you go to look to other subscription, here you see a lot of subscription which you can add to monitor, which is relevant for your business. You can see certain categories. You can see anything related to exposure. And maybe you have assets, again, the example where maybe you have open S3 buckets, open ports on it, or any type of that, any vulnerability, such as the Equifax vulnerability or Log4j on your external attack surface, and we can look for it. And we can look IT hygiene in general, right? Just you can filter on it. And then here you can see the RDP, the WordPress, the FTPs, the CVs, and then you can filter on it, right? Very, very easy to use. So that is what I wanted to show to you, how external attack service management, right, is able to use. Then here you can make dashboards from it. And this is pretty standard now for my example I have here for my external attack service management. For my example.com, I can see I got 28,000 assets. I got assets with CVEs, with any types of SSL being expired, and I can tailor these examples, right? With certain vulnerable websites, right? With assets with SNMP. I got here in this example, I do have 8 IP addresses on a block list. So which are these, right? And I can see the country. So it makes it more more easy to read, right? So what is it, what I have on my external attack surface management? So if I circle back, at least as part of the demo, this is what I wanted to show you for external attack surface management. What I wanted to show you there as well, and I can see we time is flying, that you can integrate this with web application scanning here as well, right? So here you can create that scan, right? So, or I can circle back to workspace, and if I just to show you that I have my web application scanning here as well. When you create those scans, you can circle back to it integrates back into web application scanning. But because I promise you that I gave you a brief overview of web application scanning as well, typical things when you're adding on FQDNs and so on, and you get an overview of what you can see here. Web application scanning, it's part of the Tenable One platform as external attack surface management there as well. But it is purely focusing on the OWASP security framework. So typical things like broken access control, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, typical things you would like to monitoring, whether that is externally or internally. You can look for that for those vulnerabilities, and you can see it behaves the same way, right? If you look to per application, for instance, I have here a vulnerable website built in my own lab environment. Here you can see, okay, I've got unsupported Apache software. I got insecure protocols here. It makes it more meaningful, and it is not that hard to set it up, right? So at least to have an overview of your security posture from your website, again, whether that is externally or whether that is internally. Now, how we do that, just to close up, we can see you can create the different types of policies, and then here you can see do the scan simply as how you do any kind of vulnerability management scan. You can do it with credentials, you can do it with Selenium scripts when you need to log in, yes or no. Predefined templates, we didn't talk about much about that. When Log4j came out, we immediately came already with best practices and templates you can use already out of the box, or just a simple overview. What is my website look like? What is my attack surface, I would say, in terms of links, parts, etc., etc. And so that will provide you this overview, so you can easily see, okay, I got 2 critical and I got 16 high severity vulnerabilities. At least you know how to set this up. And as Olaf mentioned in the beginning, it's pretty straightforward. You can make it as complex as you want, so especially with Selenium script, but we can do it. We have a plugin in the Chrome browser to help you and to assist you to use some log forms there as well. Because when sometimes you have pages, websites which parts of it consist of one page, but when you log in, suddenly it consists of multiple pages, right? So your attack surface is expanding, so you want to monitor that as well. So at least you have an overview on what we do in the external attack surface management, right? And if you go back to the workspace, and I should go to the beginning here, we just briefly touched upon the web application scanning, how to do that in Tenable.io, and how we can do that with external attack surface management. I think in respect of time, Olaf, with a couple of minutes left, maybe there are some questions.
We still have some, let's look at the Q&A if there's still something we can answer of the things that are still outstanding. I answered a few ones already. So if anybody has, okay. Oh, somebody asked about just coming in about the recording. So the webinar will be recorded, is being recorded, and will be shared after this session. As well. Did I miss Lumin? Yeah, we didn't cover Lumin specifically in this session. We will go in the next webinar. We'll talk about the exposure cards,
indeed,
which is also more on the Lumin side of, so more indeed going to a higher level. Yeah, so to the overall. And Jerry, I think you're.
No, exactly. I just wanted to check something, and we didn't want to distract you, Olaf. Sorry. Are there any other questions left?
No, that was answered.
Yeah, we give you a couple of minutes to think about it. You can ask me anything.
Yeah, one question about best practice about removing items from when vulnerability host is no longer vulnerable. Yeah, of course it will disappear at that point. Or patch, yeah. So how, as it says, the vulnerability as it says in the vulnerabilities list as last seen. Yeah. So if you look at that part, yeah.
Do I need to touch upon best practice or?
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Do you see that question as well in the Q&A?
Yeah, no, I'd let you leading it while I'm driving
yeah.
the Tenable. I'm logging into Tenable.io. I just
so what is our
want
best
to
practice
explain a bit about best practice, how that looks like. Right, if you go back to Tenable.io, we have. I just show you first, and we have like a scan strategy guide. It's on. Maybe you can Google it. We can send it to you if you would like. But if you look from a best practice point of view, when you set up your scan, it's pretty straightforward. But if you look to your scan, yes, we have a best practice, right? So in the end, you can scan whatever you want, right? With the advanced scan, you can make and create and use the plugins you would like to use. But the question is, what do you ask? What do you advise in regards to a best practice, right? Now, if you look to a typical vulnerability management plugin, now I'm assuming that we have done the host discovery, we have created connector to cloud, so at least we have our assets, a big part of it, we have it visible. But if then you look to the scan best practice, hey, basically what you do is using the templates, because the basic network scan is doing what it says it does, right? It's a collection of plugins we use. Tenable is advising customer and is most suitable for a network scan, right? These are using the plugins as a best practice. We also always need to take into consideration sometimes you have not vulnerable, sensitive application, right? And you don't want to disturb the operations. And because you're using that basic network scan, I'm sure it's not intrusive, right? So you can configure the internal scanners, and this will use the most important plugins already. You don't need to define your plugin yourself. No, it's part of that basic network scan. You can enrich it later on. So first you do the basic network scan, and in the discovery, this is all being predefined. You don't need to change anything on it. And what you can do is upgrading or enriching the network scan by providing credentials, or via credential manager. Have like dichotics, for instance, or you provide a service account so you can enrich that data, so you are able to see applications which are installed. It will also lower your false positive, right? Because we have a high likelihood of estimating certain vulnerabilities on your host. And Tenable is doing actually that quite well. So that is one of the best practice, as I would say, as a takeaway, and then build it out from there, right? So host discovery scan, basic network scan, credential scan, and then last but not least, auditing, right? With auditing, you can check on certain hardening files, right? So we have a lot of hardening files here as well, but at least we use them. We have them in the platform. You can use your own. You can customize it. But these sys benchmark files, every IT vendor is having them, even your firewall vendor, and you can check on hardening. So you have your asset management, you have your vulnerability management, but your compliance check, your hardening will typically check on certain links, like whether are too many services are running, etc., etc. If a guest account is used, yes or no. A lot of things are checking. So on the configuration level, that if your asset is enough being locked down to what it should be, right? So I think it's a long answer, I know, Olaf, to come back to as a best practice. Again, there is, if you two things, and I will stop. If you look to first thing is to, for instance, the plugins sites you can use to see actually what kind of vulnerabilities you have. You can look for the plugins, for instance, the newest, the latest, Or you can see sometimes you have other types of devices such as IoT or any kind of application. You want to see whether there are plugins to at least detect these types of applications or assets, right? And the other one is the PDF strategic guide. I think maybe I can show it to you very quickly. It's just publicly available. Here we go. It is, if you Google on this, the Tenable Scan Strategy Guide is a good resource. Yeah. So I think these two I will recommend. And there is even one from Sense as well. It's not Tenable, but it is at least more best practice on where you start with your vulnerability management. Okay, where are we on time, Olaf? Oh, we are good on time. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
And so to circle back, I went to log out because on the 15th of February, we're going to do the second part of the webinar. And to remind you, make sure you're subscribed and hope we can see you back. We will focus more on attack path analysis, right? How can that bring value? We will talk about the Lumen. What is my security posture looks like, right? To certain critical application where you can see your Lumen exposure score there as well, and what kind of information we can take out of that, right? So you can see if you're meeting your SLAs, you can see the trending about that. So these are the three pillars we're going to show you in 2 weeks. So I hope this was this useful for you. Thanks for your time and attendance. Olaf, anything from your side before we wrap up?
No, that's it.
All right, then I thank everybody for your time.
Thank you all. See you next time.